Islington, a gleaming oasis of left-wing values. A place where there's an Ottolenghi on every street corner and Jeremy Corbyn making chutney in his allotment. It's a place where the enlightened few of London can gather together in leafy, liberal harmony. So what the bloody hell is this doing here?
I think I noticed it when I first moved in, and I thought, oh wow, that seems quite patriotic, and I think I've noticed like a bit of change over time, but I've never seen the guy that does it.
It's kind of true. When you look around, every window has a display on it, whether it be the gallery or the coffee shop or the sushi shop, they all have displays. This isn't exactly a shop.
There's a lot of vintage stores or antique stores along here, so that's what like Camden Passage is known for. So I think they're like, an antique store, but no. You notice it straight away because it's just some weird stuff in the window. Some questionable, some very, I don't know, you assume it's somebody who's quite kind of right-wing.
But I think my personal opinion with that kind of thing is that people are entitled to their opinion. I was sort of like, I want to know who did it, I want to see who it is behind it. Because I work here, but I've never seen anyone coming out of that door.
Every day for a year, I would walk past this window on my way to work. Each time I saw it, I couldn't help but wonder, who would take the time to do this, and why? So, I scoped out the area, knocked on the door, and slipped an interview request delicately through the letterbox. Then, all I could do was wait. Until...
Okay, I've just got a text from R. Borzello saying, "Dear Louis, thank you for your message. Please do you like the display? I'd be happy to talk to you."
I'm not a collector. I am what I call an accumulator. I'm the kind of person that if I was living in a council flat and people would smell fumes coming out from underneath the door, and there would be me on the bed decomposing, and around me would be empty tins of beans and old newspapers. I'm just on a different level of accumulating like that. I sort of just accumulated things. This is my great-grandfather making wine. Started a bulletin board over 40 years ago and started with one little thing. Remember, 2 pints of milk and a loaf of bread. Political badges, a letter that Uncle John sent to me, a Christmas card from my grandmother. My mother always used to have those things and save them. She couldn't throw things away, which is partly me. I have a hard time throwing certain things away. My bulletin board became full. I had an office downstairs, and then there was the front window. So I thought, well, you can't leave an empty front window. So I started putting things in the window. You know, things that I'd collected. Every time I went to a market, I'd find something from the 53 coronation. I ended up with hundreds and hundreds of things. I have no interest in the royal family at all. Well, it's more interesting to drink a cup of coffee or tea out of something that was made in 1890 for Prince Albert or whoever it was.
So, Bob isn't an antagonist right-winger, but rather an accumulator with a fondness for Royalist antiques. But while my first question may have been answered, there was so much more to Bob's story.
I grew up in a neighborhood in Chicago where the second generation of immigrants went. Their sole purpose was to escape a horrible life and then make a better life. There was a lot of discrimination against Southern Europeans. Unfortunately for my dad's generation, because during the war, Americans were fighting the Italians, so they were regarded as sort of suspect. This is a photograph of just my cousins coming over to visit that my dad would have taken. My dad could do anything. He was a photographer, taught himself how to play the saxophone, fix our car. I can't do anything at all. I was useless. And one day he just said, you should, spread your wings. Go to Europe. And his pal got me a place at London School of Economics. And that's where I went. That's me and Frankie. At the end of my sort of stay in London, I met this girl, Frankie, and we went out every day, and it was going to be her 21st birthday. So I rang Frankie up. I said, will you meet me in Paris for your birthday? And she said yes. And on the train back to London, I proposed. I was too shy to ask her, so I wrote it down, and she wrote back, yes. We stayed in Chicago for 6 years. One day I saw an advert in the Chicago Tribune. You too could be a winner. We're looking for a go-getter who wants to get ahead, run the editorial department of our book publisher. It's like, I thought, this has got to be a joke ad. I went and I met this guy he was a go-getter. And he said, I'll tell you what, we're publishing books. Some of them were like, get ahead in this tough world. They're sort of sexy books, but cheap, really cheap novels. I said I don't mind the sexy part that is about it. But getting ahead, anybody who can't really make it is lazy. I said, I don't believe in that stuff. The next morning, I got a call. They said, I'll tell you what, Bob, we're starting a newspaper. Today, in America, they're called supermarket tabloids. They said, you'll have complete control. So I went to the job. I think me getting a bit fed up is what I was doing. And Frankie hating the weather in Chicago. We decided to come back to London to live in 1966. And we've been here ever since then. We discovered that people, in that year that we were away from America, people had started poster businesses. Poster shops were everywhere. And then Frankie said, why don't we open a shop? I said, well, that's a good idea. And it was the first poster shop in Britain. We started wholesaling posters. Then we started mail ordering posters. And then people couldn't supply us with enough posters. So we started having to publish our own posters. We do a poster of Jimi Hendrix or Donny Osmond, the psychedelic lot. Che Guevara, God, he must have sold 100,000 posters of Che Guevara. So he bought a house down the road in Camden Passage. And the whole building became for the business. When we first moved here, I started looking at other papers, and it made me aware of what papers were doing. They used to have something called the Press Council. All the papers signed up to it, and there was a sort of code of conduct. And I saw that you're not allowed to use someone's color, race, religion, if it's not pertinent to the story. So I started looking through papers, and I thought, it goes on all the time. Every day I would spend, an hour looking through the papers. Well, I found out the technique of complaining, and I started complaining. I've got every letter I ever wrote. I think there's 1,500. They really were fed up with me. One editor sent one of my complaints back torn up in little pieces of paper with a paper clip on it. The Daily Mail, they wrote an editorial about me and put my address on there. Gradually, papers stopped doing it. I often think I should start looking at papers again, but I got other fish to fry. I think I started accumulating seriously because when we moved here, we couldn't bring all the junk with me. I like to put together groups of things to show how people latch onto an idea. Also, they reflect the time that they were done. I do things as jokes. I started the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Fruits and Vegetables, and I do all these, posters like with a lemon in the middle, and it says, hug me, but don't squeeze me. And my daughter was living there at the time, and she was to get notes pushed through the door. You filthy people, blah, 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 blah. And it's hard to believe, but some of them take it seriously. A lot of my personal jokes are not nice. No one gets them except me. But I think, what do I care? Some things I don't put in. I collect racist stuff. I mean, some stuff is pretty gross. You think that, how do they get away with doing this kind of thing? Why would they want to do this kind of thing? Racism changes, but it's still the same. So whether just knowing in the past is a lesson to learn so you don't do it, well, that's ridiculous, because people still do it. One day I'll be brave enough and put it in my window and say, this is how things were, and they haven't changed that much.
Do you think about how people will remember you?
No, I don't think about that at all. Not in the least. How they remember me, a lot of them will look at this stuff and say, what kind of a nutter did we have for a great grandpa? Holy moly. When I was a kid, my grandfather would take me to the cemetery to clean up the graves. Then we'd go outside of the gates for lunch, talking Italian for, I don't know, half an hour. So the afterlife I believe in is being remembered. I like to think that I keep my relatives, especially the ones I like, alive by remembering them.
So, after hours in his company, Bob remains a mystery. And while I can't say for certain what makes him keep the window going, or his many other pursuits, there was one thing in particular he said that stuck with me.
We can't change the world, but maybe we could create something which is what we'd like it to be.